So dudes, when the AK-12 came out on ACE, the most noticeable part about it was that it was equipped with NATO sights, being the hollow, ACOG, reflux. When the AK-12 came out on ACE, the most noticeable part about it was that it was equipped with NATO sights, being the hollow, ACOG, reflex, and red dot, instead of the Russian sights the Spetsnaz use. And one of the things a lot of my friends remarked about the AK-12 on Fuse before ACE came out is that they didn't like the ACOG scope, which I found kind of funny. I actually liked the Russian ACOG a lot more than the default ACOG. There's no such thing as a Russian ACOG, by the way. The ACOG is just a Western type of sight. But, you know, gun nerd, no one cares. But the AK-12 in combination with an angled grip and an ACOG, or really any gun with an angled grip and an ACOG, requires a significant amount of recoil control to get good with, and the hollow is my favorite of the close range sights. So when Ace got a hollow on his AK, I figured this would be a pretty good aggro gun with an angled grip. And this eventually translated into months of clip gathering, because using the hollow was basically my preferred way of running the AK-12 for the Ace guide. I found myself doing lots and lots of T-hunts practicing with the angled and hollow combo, and by the time I tried to go back to a foregripped AR, I found myself missing that ADS speed a little bit. It just felt too slow, especially compared to other FPS games where the ADS time is much faster, something I'm a little bit more used to. A couple months pass of me not really using the ACOG at all, except a few times, but I never sought out to use it. I always just ended up having to use it in situations where my teammates didn't bring a dock or something. Found myself not liking the ACOG in general. Whenever I tried to do T-hunts with an ACOG, I felt like I was fighting against the zooming of my field of vision on what I'm aiming at. If I have to snap onto a target, the task seems to be a lot more difficult than it used to be, and instead of letting the recoil of the gun do some of the guessing work when I go for the head, I find myself overthinking where the aiming point is, trying to overcorrect it, and then I correct too much, and then it sails right over the top of where I want it to go. Whenever you zoom in, there's a relative degree of motion that the target does that wouldn't be there if you were using a close range sight. And I have my sensitivities in Siege set 1-to-1. That means that I move the mouse the same amount with an ACOG as I would with a hollow sight. Your eyes have to move more to stay on the target when you're zooming in, as opposed to with a hollow sight. That was all done to train my muscle memory, which according to some aiming scientists like Aimer7, the guy who made the most popular Kovacs aiming workout regimen, muscle memory isn't really a thing, so there's no point in doing that when it comes to using a mouse, which there's no scientific data on this because nobody's trying to study something this specific in an academic field. We're all just going off of personal anecdotes, any kind of aiming guide, any kind of best ways to get more kills in Siege, best Kovacs, whatever the blah, blah, blah. All of that is just anecdotal right now. It's something that a lot of people have done for themselves, and it works, and then they go, okay, this worked for me. If you try it, it might work for you. We're kind of in the early budding stages of the physical training components of working on things like your mechanical aim in FPS games. So when I say, oh, I did a bunch of T-hunts, I did a bunch of this, and I found that, that's just me. That's my personal anecdote. But since I've been doing this, I have been playing a little bit better. Not by a lot, and in a week, my stats will probably go back to their potatoing ways, but I have been playing a little bit better. And I think it's because the ACOG, for some people, they feel like they have to use it. They feel like, oh, if it's there, I just got to use it. Why would I just not use the ACOG if it's available? Well, if you feel that way, and I felt that way too, and it's not an indictment, but if you feel that way, I think it's because you're using it like a crutch. You want that extra amount of zoom because it makes your target acquisition a little bit easier, and you've grown used to it. But it severely limits the gunfights that you can take. If I have the time to line up my shot, like when I full send in this Habana clip, it's a little bit different. But you're not always going to have that luxury. And you can see me potato on this Mozzie here a little bit, and I have to eventually get out my pistol, which isn't a fully automatic primary, but I can see what I'm aiming at. If I have to swing on a guy that I know is there, it becomes so much more difficult to do it with an ACOG. Now, if I'm just chilling and I'm holding an angle, that's where I want an ACOG. I'm not going to say, oh, I don't want the ACOG if I'm just holding an angle, if I'm playing passively like an anchor like Doc or Rook. I'm gonna put an ACOG on. I'm not stupid. The ACOG is great for lawn angles, and that's kind of it. We have this terminology that I'm sure other Siege players use called getting cogged, where you're holding an angle and then all of a sudden you just get slammed in the front of your head by a guy you can't see, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's an ACOG. I got cogged. There are some situations where it's better to have an ACOG. Those are called long-range angles, and that's kind of it. If you are taking the other variety of gunfights in this game, and mind you, the average kill distance in this game is the length of a transit bus, 10 meters, I found it to be more of a hindrance than a help. I think that you can train yourself to get good with the hollow and use it at a distance of 10 meters and have more versatility in the wide range of gunfights that you take. And the ACOG is one of the most polarizing balancing points in Rainbow Six Siege. If an operator is too good, we often take away their ACOG to curb their fragging power, right? Free Speed, save one exception, have had it removed completely from their arsenals on defense. Jaeger, Bandit, Smoke, and Maestro have all had to part ways with the coveted Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight. When Maestro came out with a gun with an 80-round magazine as his primary, it had an ACOG on that too, but it was okay because he was a 3 armor, I guess. Except not really, because this thing was a laser beam that could automatically win any long-range gunfight it got into, and it essentially made the thick French brothers' ability to do the same thing pretty much obsolete. Even with the ACOG, the MP5 has been nerfed to the point of being worse on paper than the MP5K and the FMG9 with recent buffs, and even the MP5 SD, two of which are just different versions of the MP5. In fact, the integrally suppressed MP5 has higher damage than the base MP5, which is kind of weird. So ACOGs on defense are kind of a hassle to balance. So if they're such a hassle to balance and they're so good, how come everybody on attack gets to have one except for Nook? Sorry, Nook. I think that UB is balancing the game this way for one reason and one reason only. A sight like the ACOG is only really a benefit when you are holding a lawn angle and expecting the enemy to push into your line of fire. It's not that good for aggressive play. On attack, it's really for flank watch and baiting. Stop baiting. All your favorite flank watchers, all your nomad players, usually they'll be running the AK-74 with the ACOG. Why? Because they're usually holding down a hallway or a corner. I can tell you the reason I primarily played the ACOG on everything. It was the same reason that I played Twitch over every other operator, and why I played Jaeger over every other operator. I was trying to help my team, damn it! I was trying to optimize my contribution to the team as best as I could, and since on paper the F2 was the best gun on attack, and since the 416 was the best gun on defense, I just made it easy for myself. I'm talking about the 43 damage 416, not the 38. But by doing this, I was setting myself up for failure, because when UB kicked those foundations from under me, it hurt very bad. It hurt a lot. Naturally, the Jaeger speed change didn't do anything to his pick rate, because his gadget is a must spring, and they didn't do anything to it. But nobody cares, because Jaeger mains are an oppressed class, and you know that's just the culture that we have to live in, and we'll try to move forward despite that. And don't get me wrong, I think that some guns have been over nerfed, and in some situations an ACOG is taken away without changing the gun, which is kind of stupid. Maestro losing his ACOG wasn't really that much of a nerf, because you can play aggro with an 80-round magazine and a really high rate of fire just as well. Some people were already using the hollow over the ACOG when the ACOG was available on Maestro. And if you're good enough, you can play some of those lawn angles on defense with a hollow almost as well as you would with an ACOG. A good player with really good mechanical aim is only going to lose a couple of gunfights that they would have won with an ACOG. Not relying solely on an ACOG allows you to focus your aim training to one particular type of sight and get used to how that functions alone. Combine that with regular training with a particular gun, and I think you can get pretty comfortable with it and start busting heads. As Bruce Lee once said, I fear the dude who did a kick a bunch instead of that dude who did a bunch of kicks. A bunch of different kicks, not the same kick. That dude sucks. After 4 years of making videos on every single operator in the game, I have inadvertently ended up becoming the guy who did a bunch of kicks once
Yeah, I'm watching.
which is great for making YouTube videos, but not so great for playing the game. My point of this video essentially being that if you are nothing without the ACOG, then you don't deserve it. The ACOG is fine, but a little bit overrated and good at one thing alone, lawn angle holding, and I don't care how long you hold that angle on attack, you have to plant the bomb someday. So that's pretty much it. I encourage you to use the hollow more and discover the power of the angled grip hollow combo. I think you'll like it, trust me. Deuces.